Welcome in, everyone. You are listening to the Authority Podcast here on the B Podcast Network. Thanks, as always, for being with us. Glad to have you for a conversation today where we're going to be talking about leadership, and particularly leadership focused on teams where everyone wins. Right? And a lot of important ideas here, things that get overlooked often, I think, certain things that are under discussed often when we think about leadership, or even when we reflect on our own leadership. So excited to have my guest, Tony Chatman, here to discuss. For over 20 years, Tony has partnered with some of the most successful organizations in the world, including Chase Bank, the U.S. Secret Service, Phillips 66, Clear Channel, and St. Joseph's Health. He specializes in bridging differences in perspectives, communication styles, and experiences by addressing the universal need we all share to feel valued and seen. I have a feeling that's going to come up some more. Tony is a scientist and a chemical engineer, as well as a husband, father, and a former leader of a nonprofit dedicated to community upliftment. He combines all of those experiences with intellect and humanity and is equal parts head and heart. So I think all of that gives you a good foundation and context for this discussion. Tony's book is called The Force Multiplier: How to Lead Teams Where Everyone Wins. Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ross, thanks so much for having me.
I wanted to start with, of course, we talk leadership a lot here, and it's kind of one of the through lines here, and our listeners are leaders. And felt like a great place to start is identifying the angle that you're coming at it with, right? What is in your mind when you think about leadership and what leaders should be? I wanted to, I guess, ask, like, what should be the mission statement of leadership? I think that'll give us a good understanding of what is underpinning this book, as we'll talk about what you write, right, in the different styles and tactics of leadership. What we should be aspiring to when we are saying, and I know you write about really that you can't be being an effective leader means you need to be leading people effectively, right? And so leadership as an action, as what you're doing versus your title. But yeah, would love to hear you just kind of define what someone should be thinking when they are saying, I want to be a leader or I want to practice leadership.
Sure, that's a great question. So, what I would like to do is take you back to a very specific day in my life. I had a very close friend, he high-ranking officer in the U.S. Army, and he was once again being deployed to Afghanistan, right? So, this is a good friend. This is not just some any old friend. This was a person who our lives were intertwined with. Our spouses were close, our children were close. So, I was pretty moved by knowing he'd be gone for a year. So, we decided to host a going away celebration party, whatever, I don't know. Call it what you want to, at our house. Had about 40 or 50 people. And there was a point in time after eating, drinking, all this other stuff, where we just went around the room and shared. And there was a mutual friend of ours who's a high-ranking officer, and he had been to a number of what he coined these deployment parties for many times. So I knew he'd have something very unique to say, a different perspective. I wasn't prepared for what he'd say. He said, "You're what I call a force multiplier because by your very presence, you bring out the best in everyone around you." I'm sure he said some other stuff. I don't remember. I was fixated on that phrase because as a person who does teach, train, and coach on leadership, I've heard so many definitions, everything from leaders change the culture, leaders create and hit the mission, leaders make other leaders. But the idea that the leader is to bring out the best everyone was, I don't know if it was foreign to me, but it resonated in such a way that it gave me a new language to think about how we should lead. Because often leaders, they're good at leading certain people and they're not so effective at leading others. So that's a long way of saying my mission statement for leaders is, when you step into the role of leadership, your goal is to make everyone better than they were before you got there. That means more effective, that means more productive, but actually better. And if you don't, then it becomes hard to justify your existence.
Is there a particular part of that you noticed when you're looking at what's often written about leadership, or how leadership is often discussed? that stands out as either, I mean, the idea of your job as being to make everyone better? Is it, I guess, just frequently not made part of the definition? Is there a common definition of leadership that is sort of in opposition to that idea?
I don't know that there's anything in direct opposition to that idea. I think what happens is people often define what leadership is based on either what they have seen or what the current needs are of their organization. So if an organization needs to create more leaders, then a great leader is one who creates more leaders. If a leader needs to navigate change, then a great leader is one who leads through change. And so all those things are true, but I think there's a fundamental thing. And there's a part of me that thinks that at one point this was true, somewhere back in the past, that this was an expectation of leadership. But somewhere I just think it's gotten diluted as business has become more complex and there are all these other nuances that have to be added that's just been forgotten.
So I guess, what does it mean to make everyone better? Right? Like, what does that look like? Can it be done? Is it one to one? Is it one to many? Does it involve inspiration, micromanagement? I mean, what are the elements of it when we think about like how leaders accomplish this? Is there one way, or are there a variety of ways?
The answer to all of that is yes. It is completely situational. I think I have this thing where I refer to, it's awfully of the herd mentality. I'm going to do this one thing and it's going to change everyone. And that's just not real. We're all individuals. We're all individually motivated. We have different needs, goals, agendas, strengths, weaknesses, experiences. And so it takes a lot more to understand who the people are in your team. Now, there are some basic things, kind of fundamental, that everyone's going to need. They're going to need to be valued, right? People want to feel valued. How they feel valued may change by person, but they want to feel valued. They need direction. They need to be trained. They need to have the resources to complete their work. So all of those things are kind of going to be in there, but then it's going to change based on who the person is. And that's where it takes a lot more effort and work and focus. So it's a very individual answer.
Are there certain, I guess, competencies? You write about relationship-based leadership and that being a really effective approach. I'm wondering, like, what's foundational to that? What is required to, I guess, begin to use that approach to leadership? And what does it mean to start to enter into building relationships and then being able to lead? But I would guess, and you can tell me first, but the relationship comes first, right? And then once you have the foundation of that, then you can maybe set up to lead, but that it would be a little harder to back into it. But you tell me.
Yeah. I do want to clear something up because it's easy to listen to this and say, okay, this all sounds soft, right? Okay, it's going to be a relationship. It's warm and fuzzy. It's no. It is, I am building a connection with the people I lead. I'm doing so that they trust me, they respect me, they understand that I value them, so that when chaos comes, those things are no longer in question, right? So competencies that are really important, great communication skills, because you're going to have to be able to give people the direction and the vision and their purpose and their role under various circumstances. Often it's said somewhere around 80% of a person's leadership is determined by their communication skills. So I'm going to start with that. Then I'm going to say your ability to delegate, right? And delegate is one of those fascinating things. I'm going to be honest with you, I have really grown in my delegation in the last 2.5 years, way after writing this book, because the reality is it is so much easier to do it on your own because you can often do it faster and you can get it done the way you want it to be done. But the truth is that's no longer leadership. That's contribution of an individual. And so part of leadership is being able to effectively delegate. And there's a science to that, right? I get into it a bit in the book. I know another part of it, and this is two things you have to balance: correcting poor behavior and performance while rewarding great performance. Those two things, people are often good at one or the other. They're really good at correcting and they challenge, but then they don't reward and give recognition when people go above and beyond the call of duty. Or the opposite, they go above and beyond the call of duty, but they let too much stuff slide. And then what it does is it dilutes the expectations of the team. And so those are just four basic things I would start with.
Yeah.
But I want to fill this in there though.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I think, no. So I was having this conversation earlier today with a branding coach. And I was telling him one of the things you have to realize is there's a difference between leadership skills and leadership characteristics. So those are skills that people need to have. But I also believe that there are characteristics they need to have. They need to be emotionally mature. They need to be learners, and they have to have the ability and willingness to grow. Those are three things that I also believe are critical to leadership success.
Yeah. Can anyone do it? I mean, are the characteristics learnable? Are certain people more predisposed to leadership?
I think the ability to influence people, anyone can do. Okay. And that's why the idea of the force multiplier is really more about influence than position. I do believe that people have certain characteristics that may limit their ability to be leaders until they're overcome. Emotional maturity is one of the biggest ones because cave under stress and you use that then against your team members because you're stressed, that's damaging, right? So I do believe the skill set anyone can learn. Over time, I believe anyone can become a leader or a person of influence, but there's levels to this. They're not all going to be the same or have the same capabilities.
So much of the importance of effective leadership, especially tangibly, is in employee engagement, retention, satisfaction, productivity. I mean, and there's the big picture goals about what is the potential of an organization, where can it go to? But on a day to day, it really manifests in what's happening with the staff, the team. Are they happy with where they are? They happy with who's their supervisor, right? And that well-known fact or statistic or whatever you want to call it about people leaving managers, not companies, not jobs, right? But I guess, what does the general typical employee want in a leader? Do they want to be led at all? I mean, like when a leader is coming at this and conceiving of what is required, I feel like part of that is getting in that mind space. Some of it is the importance of, I guess, being self-aware, self-reflective. I think many times as we are working toward what we believe to be that leadership role or position, or even just within a team, peer-to-peer leadership, we're so focused on what we want to do once we're in that role. And then once you're there, almost forget what it was like when you were in the other seat and what your perspective was on whoever was in the leadership chair at that time, and what were the things that they either were or were not able to establish with you, and that you need to have the right starting point, right? Because you can have a great vision, great ideas, a lot of care for the work in the organization. You can be conscientious about what you're doing, and yet there can still be a disconnect if the people you're meant to be leading haven't yet decided that they are interested in being led by you, I would think. But I guess, what are people looking for in that regard? Because that's an important, like, it's all subjective, right? And you need to lead people in a way that they are willing to be led.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I always tell new leaders, managers, supervisors is for the first 3 to 9 months, people are not treating you based on who you are. They're treating you based on who the previous leader was, right? You're establishing yourself. but they still think you're that old person. And so that's the establishing of yourself becomes really critical. I often give new supervisors or managers the 30-day challenge. I say, okay, here's what I want you to do for 30 days, regardless of how they treat you. I want you to treat every one of your employees with dignity and respect. That does not mean don't challenge them. That does not mean don't call them higher. That does not mean not have expectations of them, but dignity and respect. You are setting a pattern of expectation because most employees want that. Beyond that, there's a reason why so much of the book goes into different personalities. My experience is that, and when I say my experience, I mean my personal experience of being a leader, but also working with various leaders in various industries and various organizations, understanding how people are differently motivated, how people differently perceive the world and perceive the workplace, and how people are, what it takes to connect with different people is, if you get it, it becomes your competitive advantage. If you miss it, it becomes your Achilles heel. It's really that big because, you know, you used all these examples, you said a lot of things, and it was also important because there are people who absolutely like to have tons of communication to the point where other people would call it micromanaging. They want that. They want that directness. They want no ambiguity. There are other people who will absolutely lose their mind if you give them that much detail. They will say, stop micromanaging me. You don't trust me. And so understanding that is really important. At the beginning, can you do all of that? No, you can't. It takes time to establish that. It takes time to establish the relationship. I strongly suggest to people at the beginning, have the conversation. Hey, hey, I'm new in this role. My goal is to help everyone in this group be better. Okay. It means I'm learning each of us. We're all in different places. We have different strengths, different areas of opportunities for advancement and improvement. Okay. But I want you to know that I am working on your behalf. Okay. We are on the same team. And I mean, I'm even different. I'll tell people, okay, look, I'm going to tell you exactly about myself. I know this. Okay. Because you need to understand this about me personally. When something out of the blue comes and it's massive and it has an impact on us, here's what's going to happen. I am going to freak out for 2 to 3 minutes. Okay. That's going to happen. Okay. If you're around that time, don't take anything personal. It has zero to do with you. Then my engineering brain kicks in. I become laser focused and all I care about is fixing stuff. Okay. It's very easy to misinterpret both of those, but because I'm communicating with you ahead of time, I want you to know that's what's going to happen. I'm trying to be in your best interest, but I know my weaknesses. Okay. So I'm letting you know this. Now, when it happens, I'll probably have to remind you again after it happened. Hey, this is not about you, but I'm setting up these expectations because I'm actually self-aware. But what I want to make sure does not happen is in those moments, you misinterpret this as I am no longer for you, but I'm now against you. Because if you believe that, we're never going to get done what we want to get done. We're never going to become what we want to become, right? You know, you used the word engagement earlier. And I think people have various definitions of the word engagement. My definition of the word engagement is very simple. Engagement is how much someone cares. Because they care, what are they willing to do? So we talk about emotional commitment, rational commitment, going above and beyond, all of those things. It's really a sign of how much do they care. If they care, they take ownership. If they don't care, they say that ain't in my job description. So it's when you understand that it's that simple, then I'm managing how much they care. And there's different ways to do that, but that's really my focus.
I think it's always dangerous to say that anything is universally true, right? There's always exceptions. But I think one of the things that would be true in the widest array of circumstances is that people who are part of a team, whom one is leading, and different types of organizations regardless, they are most likely to connect with that leadership and to fulfill their potential, perform at their best if they see that it's in their interest to do so, right? That
Right.
they are getting something out of it. And that's true in all different types of organizations, right? There's a very different type of leadership structure in the military versus in a corporate setting versus in the government versus in on a sports team, right? It looks different in all those cases, but in all the scenarios, it's, is it in my interest to do what I'm being told to do here by the leader? And that certainly is the difference between compliance and engagement and fulfillment of potential, right? And it's, you know, and I come back to that because, and I was just listening today. It was from a handful of years ago, but I'm just listening to it now. But there's a podcast about the Seattle Supersonics and how they eventually ended up moving to Oklahoma City. But the part today was about the brief period where Howard Schultz, the former Starbucks CEO, owned the team and some of the difficulties he had in with the players because he wanted to inspire them with the type of leadership that he was used to using in the corporate setting. And the same thing didn't necessarily work for professional athletes because the things that are in their interest and what they're incentivized and motivated by is not the same thing, right? And so if you are on a guaranteed contract to make, you know, whatever, however much you're making, and it doesn't really matter what you do, like you need to be motivated in a different way than someone who is trying to climb the corporate ladder. You know, another part you mentioned, like knowing your weaknesses, you know, some of those interviewed said, well, he didn't really know much about basketball, right? Like he was a good guy, he knew a lot of things, but like when it came to that stuff, there was a disconnect because it was easy for, you know, people to dismiss, well, he doesn't really know that much about this thing that we're doing here. But anyway, the point being that it was about, as I took away from it, one of the things was a failure to identify what actually motivates these people that I'm trying to lead, and what are their incentives and what is going to be in their interest. What are they going to want to live? And I mean, that's, you know, that whole thing is challenging because that's one industry where, for the most part, the leader is the lesser compensated, often lesser empowered, right? The coach makes less money than the players and is usually more likely to be on the hook, etc. In this case, the owner is more wealthy, but still, when you're getting your money regardless. Anyway, that's a long digression, but I think it's just like, you know, it was one illustration of different environments where one person who is a highly effective leader in certain settings, if they don't adapt and adjust to the people they're leading in a different setting, it falls completely flat. And it's not a reflection on, well, this person's just not a good leader. It's, you have to lead who you're trying to lead in the moment.
No, absolutely. And, you know, it's funny because the opposite of that is, of course, Mark Cuban, right? Mark Cuban comes in and he is, you know, from tech, from Yahoo, these are the things, but he went in and figured out what was important to the players, right? Players want to be, number one, the most important thing to them normally after money is playing time and then championships, right? But, you know, things like how they traveled, he changed how they traveled. He changed their locker room because he went and he got to know the different players. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier, is getting to know the people on your team. Because what happens, and I think what you just alluded to, is leaders become superstitious, right? Not superstitious in, you know, 7 years bad luck because I broke a mirror, but I did this one thing one time and it worked. So it must always work. And every time something happens, I'm going to do that one thing because it works. And if it doesn't work, it's not because my one thing didn't work. It's the people. I'm going to blame the people because my one thing is awesome, right? And that's what happens when you're married to your leadership style. And so we definitely have to have a bit of fluidity with how we lead so that we can adapt to the situation and the people that we're leading.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always felt that if you approach it, and this goes back to the very beginning, but if that it is your job is to ensure that your people can be successful, to set them up for success, to position them. Yes, hiring the right people, like knowing what to look for, knowing how to evaluate talent, those are all important elements. But I've always had a perhaps exaggerated breakdown, but I would say it's 20% about hiring the right person, 80% about what you do next. Look, sometimes some people are just such superstars that it almost doesn't matter what you do, they're going to succeed. But for most people, the organization matters, right? If you're the number one pick in the draft as a quarterback, it really matters what organization you're going into. And, and you'll even never even know how good or bad you would have been in another situation because the situation really matters. And if the leaders approach it like that and say, look, what are we doing with our onboarding? Are we providing resources? Are we communicating a vision here for what we do? Are we setting up the right team around this person? Am I giving them opportunities to pursue things that fit with their goals and ambition and development and growth, right? And when we hit some hiccups, am I all of a sudden saying, "Oh, you know what? Oh, well, I guess maybe I hired the wrong person," or am I saying, "What do I need to do differently to make sure? What did I miss? What do we need to reinforce here and set up?" But I mean, I've certainly observed it that I think it happens very often, right? That you can't. Some people treat it like it's really hard for others to develop equity in their position, right? It's like at the second anything goes wrong, we're rethinking, are they the right person versus, you know what, we have a lot of evidence that they are because when we hired them here and they did these other things and this one instance, and I'm talking about performance issues, right? Not ethical things, but that evidence that we were all wrong about them and actually that we need to get somebody else, or situational and let's figure out how to work this better.
If people could see us, they would see me nodding in agreement the entire time you're talking, right? So, all right, let's back this up for a second. And I'm going to talk pretty directly, even though I've been talking about relationships and people probably still have a problem. Some may still have a problem with, is this really soft, warm, and fuzzy? Okay, first thing is leaders have to take responsibility, right? Before I blame anyone I'm leading, have I done everything within my power to ensure their success? Have I given them the training? Have I given them the resources? Am I there for them? And here's a big one, am I getting feedback so that I know what possible obstacles are actually out there? So that's kind of I used to sit in that seat, but I don't any longer. But if I'm out of touch with what their daily life is like and all of the other things that are going on, then I may not be able to help them. So I need to know that I need that feedback. Okay. That being said, if we're going to be honest, way too many people are prematurely thrown into leadership and often for the wrong reason, right? I mean, they're promoted because they were great contributors, which that's awesome. But the natural career path development is great contributor, become a supervisor. That's like being a great catcher and being promoted to shortstop. It doesn't really make sense, right? Different skill sets. On top of that, especially, and I think it's declined really in the last 15 years or so, what organizations invest in leadership development is minuscule. So we're putting people in who may or may not have the skill set. They may have the desire, but not the skill set. And then we're not giving them the tools and the training to be effective at it. So now there's problems on both sides, right? There's I'm not doing what they need, but also I'm not even capable of it. Sure, people should take it upon themselves to get the training and have the self-initiative and all of those things. And I agree to an extent, but man, life is wild. People have other responsibilities. People have kids and spouses and finances to take care of, and elder care now with parents and all this other stuff. That's a big ask, right?
Yeah.
So I think this ain't grits where you just add water and stir, right? This thing is a lot more complicated than that. But it really does come down to, here's one thing I believe. I don't think it's universal, but I believe this. Most people want to do a good job at work. I do believe that. I believe when people interview for a job, they have the best intentions of doing well. What happens often is something happens at work, something happens with their relation with their boss, something happens with their pay, and all of a sudden that desire is quenched. Okay. And so then it becomes, it's not that we didn't hire the right person, because I agree with your assessment. I don't know if it's 80-20, but I agree with your assessment. We hire the right people all the time. We just put them in a culture that's infectious. And so they get damaged.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and sustaining that motivation to want to do well, right? Again, is it serving me? Is it rewarded in whatever that is? And people's aspirations and ambitions around how they want to do well and why and what that looks like are different, right? Like, but we want people to want to do well in the role that they're in because it leads to the outcomes that they want. For some people, that's job security. For some people, that is getting other cross-functional opportunities. For some people, that's getting a promotion. Or it looks different for everybody, but they need to feel like if I am doing well, that is being rewarded with positive outcome. And I need to know as the leader, the supervisor, the manager, what are their ambitions? What are they trying to work toward? And how am I showing them that they're making progress toward that? And how am I reinforcing that they are doing a good job, right? How do they know that they are? I want to do well in my job, but if nobody ever tells me whether or not I am, how do I know if I'm doing well, if there's something I need to correct? Right? Am I getting any guidance on that? Or do I feel like, well, I feel like I'm doing a great job here, but it seems to be unnoticed. So I'm not sure. So maybe that leads to a little backsliding or a little bit of, well, maybe I don't need to give 110%. Maybe I don't need to give my absolute best because it doesn't really seem to make a difference. Nobody's paying that much attention. And when that's happening everywhere across your organization, that everybody is throttling back 10, 15, 20%, all of a sudden you have an entire organization that isn't operating at its capabilities. And that could be a function of nobody was really communicating how anybody was doing or what was the next step, or look, where am I in the trajectory of either the role I want to move into or a raise at the end of the year, or does my boss have confidence in me or not? Are these things being shown?
No, absolutely. A gazillion things just ran through my brain all at one time, probably too many at one time, right? So what's interesting, first of all, is everything you just said or talked about goes back to this idea of relationships, which is why the relationship aspect of leadership is so important. Is it the most important thing? I don't know. But I think that without the relationship part of it, leadership falls apart quickly. Okay. It's interesting because Gallup every year does the engagement survey, right? The employee engagement in the workplace, so all that stuff. And I think last year they determined that 35% of workers in the US are fully engaged. That's a third. That's a third. So we talk about throttling back, it's a third. And these are things that are self-reported. It's not my boss says I'm fully engaged. It's I'm saying whether or not I'm fully engaged. So people are admitting based on criteria. If you look at the questionnaire, there's a bunch of stuff asked about how much they care about this, that. They're saying, I'm not fully engaged. So that's really where the answer is. We know from, for example, OC Tanner, who are the experts in the employee experience and in rewards and recognition, that one of the top drivers for employee engagement is recognition when employees go above and beyond the call of duty. Somewhere in the 70% range. I can't remember if it's 72, 75, somewhere in that space of employees who receive recognition when they go above and beyond the call of duty are fully engaged. in the 70s versus the current state of in the 30s. So that tells us when we reward people for doing a great job, not for mediocrity, but for doing a great job, then that in and of itself will give us a competitive advantage over everyone else around us, right? We would be able to double everyone else's engagement, which means we'd be able to double their output, double their performance, double their quality, double their customer service. The retention would be higher. All of those things from something as simple as this human aspect of the workplace that's often neglected. So that's really, as we're having this discussion, a reminder that we really are leading human beings, very illogical, very emotional. We have to tap into those emotions to be able to get the best out of them so that we can. I don't know of a situation where if an employee is getting what's best for them, that's not also in the best interest of the company, right? There's this relationship. If we understand that, that's why this whole relationship thing to me is so important. It's not, I mean, dude, I got high expectations of my team. They'll tell you, like, I have super high expectations of my team. So it's not like we sit around and sing Kumbaya all the time. We have, but we also, it's like, look, I know you're not perfect. There's going to be mistakes, but I expect you to take responsibility for those mistakes. I model it, I expect it, I reward it, and we move. It's really, those are the things that are important. And people not only want to be valued, they want to be part of a winning team. They want to be part of excellence. They want to feel like nobody wants to be like, yeah, I'm doing great in a mediocre company. That's not super appealing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
all of this plays in together, but it really does come back down to this relational idea of I am leading people. If I build this connection so that I understand what motivates them, what their needs are, what their obstacles are, what rewards they desire, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes work, but the rewards are massive. And it's absolutely worth that journey of doing these things, of journey of discovery.
Yeah. What are a couple of like the most damaging things a leader can do? Let's say you are doing a lot of the right things and building relationship, right? And kind of effective in a lot of ways, but are there a couple of those actions that can really be chip away at that foundation, I guess, of effective leadership?
Well, yeah, there's bunches of stuff. So some of the basic stuff, disrespecting someone, betraying their trust, stealing credit for their work. For some, it's micromanagement. Just trying to think just right off the top of my head. Those are some that come off. I think though the disrespect for a lot of people, disrespect and a betrayal of trust, those are so big. People just they underestimate how important that part is. So the problem with some of these things is they're less intentional. They more just happen. And it's the intent is being intentional. It's being intentional and saying, you know what? I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to have a situation where I'm not listening. I'm not going to have a situation where I'm failing to give recognition. I'm not going to have a situation where I'm constantly playing favorites. So one person's in the doghouse and another person can do no wrong. Those types of things. But you start off with losing your temper, betraying trust, disrespecting people, taking credit for their work, any type of lying or dishonesty. Those things right off the bat, they do so much damage. Sometimes it's hard to overcome.
Are there any things that stand out as the biggest things you've learned in writing this book and learned about leadership or how to communicate about leadership? And I feel like oftentimes I've learned this in different instances when there's certain things that you learn by doing, maybe learn through experience, maybe there's things that you have a natural aptitude for and others recognize that in you, that when it comes time to explain it, you have to go through like almost a relearning process of what are the words for this, or how am I speaking the same language to the person I'm talking to, or I didn't know there was a common vocabulary for this thing because I just kind of learned it by being in situations where I had to do it. But I'm wondering if there's things that stand out to you where you came to the book, I'm sure, based on your own experience in leadership and things that you had done over the course of your career. But then when you had to sit down and really think about, okay, how do I explain this to somebody else?
So it's a different journey for me on this one. So I started off teaching and training about leadership, and I just kept seeing the same patterns over and over again. So a lot of my learning was happening when I was doing the actual training and
Hmm.
interacting with leaders at different levels and realizing that first line supervisor has a lot of the same flaws as the person who's in the C-suite. I mean, I sit on boards, and the issues with people on the board are the same issues that you see with new managers. I mean, they just seem to just be promoted right through that in spite of it. So I pretty much knew what I wanted to say. It was more putting it in the right format and order, knowing when to stop. I clearly have a bias towards dealing with this personality stuff because I spent so much time in the book on it, right? I mean, there's
Yeah.
just no way around it. That's obvious because to me, that's, you know what? That's it. I've been working with the personality stuff since 97. Okay. Wrote the book some 20 years later than that. I had used so many different psychometric tests, been certified in them, written them, things of that nature. I could explain them in conversation. I could explain them in training, but really breaking down the nuances on paper was eye-opening for me. Writing all the nuances of putting together the personality test, because most of the personality tests I had done in person, right? I mean, they're handwritten, they're whatever, whatever. When we started building this out and all of the different scenarios and what does this combination mean? I mean, I knew it in my head, but getting it on paper was just, it was a totally different animal. And I would say that's changed my understanding of people in ways probably more than any other part of writing the book was the personality part.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great illustration. And as we're kind of getting close to the end of our conversation here, I sort of wanted to wrap on, you know, how leaders who are listening, regardless of their role or how long they've been in it, right? People who are moving, we talked earlier about when people get promoted into a position of leadership because of their effectiveness as a contributor in another role, that it's like I think it's important to be able to be self-aware about, okay, why did I get put in this role? And and have a humility. I mean, that's important, I think, for all leaders, and to establish like trust and influence, like humility to want to learn and to serve, and but not have it come at the expense of confidence, like not creating an imposter syndrome effect, but saying like, I guess one way to say it would be like, I earned it, but now I have to learn it, right? Like I earned my way into this position. I'm here for a reason. I did good things to get here, but now I'm in a different role than I was in before. So I need to learn how to be effective in this role. And it's how do I apply what I know and know how to do to make it work for me here? What are some skills that I don't have yet that I need to learn? But I think that's like a process that a lot of people would have to go through, and understanding like in the similarly to writing the book and all, it's like, okay, I know that I know this stuff. I have the confidence that I'm the right person to do this, but there's still some things I need to learn about how do I make it work in this setting and have the influence I want to have in this format, and commit to doing that instead of, say, coming up against a chapter that's hard to write and saying, actually, you know what, I'm going to skip this one. This one's hard. Or, you know what, maybe I just won't even finish the book because maybe I don't know anything. Maybe I don't know what I thought I knew. But it's kind of, it's both, right? It's that you have to know that you're the right person to be successful there, but also know that it's a continuous process of learning how to be effective where you are.
Yeah, the earning and learning, I like that phrasing. I trained in martial arts, and when I got my second degree black belt, I was actually in Japan, and I remember feeling like I did not deserve it. Like, I mean, I tested and got, but it just kind of wasn't. I was like, I'm not there yet. Now, so no, 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 no. You're there, but now you have to earn it. Like that's how we view it. Now you have to validate this promotion that you've been given. I think that's similar to what you're saying. At least that's how I'm absorbing what you're saying. I do think it's an interesting exercise for people when they get promoted to ask why them, because often we don't know. We assume, but okay, so why, what was it about me so that I have an idea of what I should be focusing on in the process? And yeah, there's always the, unfortunately, based on just the hierarchy of the workplace, the fear that people will become overly confident, control freaks, abusive, all that stuff. And that's there also. But I do think a clear understanding of why a person has been promoted even helps them in the process to say, okay, I thought it was because of these three things, and it's truthfully, it's because of this. Okay, cool. Now I know what my contribution, where it starts. So yeah.
Awesome. So, Tony, we're going to put the links below to your website and all the places where people can find you across the web. But is there anything in particular you want to point out? Anything our listeners should check out?
We are really getting active on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. And you will see me getting really, really active on YouTube over the next few months. So those are the things I would also consider. And we're working on some stuff right now that I think may be an interesting conversation for the two of us to have in the future, that it's going to lead to a new book probably around the end of this year. So that's what I think is on the horizon.
Excellent. Well, that'll be it before we know it.
Yeah.
We'll have to keep in touch on that. And listeners, check all that out. We'll put the link below to Tony's website. You can find the book on Amazon and wherever else you get your books. We'll put those links below, social media, all those different places. So check all of that out. The book again is called The Force Multiplier: How to Lead Teams Where Everyone Wins. So I hope you all enjoyed our conversation. You can go and learn more by reading the book. Please also do subscribe to The Authority for more author interviews coming your way every week, or head over to bpodcast.network to learn about all of our shows. If you like this one, there is definitely a few others you'll enjoy as well. Tony, thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Ross. It was a great conversation. Appreciate it.
This episode was edited by Gage Sanderson.